Just 6 years ago, the Supreme Court changed the fundamental definition of marriage, a definition based on a biblical Christian view of sexuality that has been operative in America since its founding. It's a traditional view of marriage that was fundamentally changed, and it was shared by almost every culture across the world for thousands of years. And the definition was that marriage was between one man and a woman. Now, the decision to redefine marriage against the will of the American people, I mean, you should have people vote on things and not have the Supreme Court basically rule in fiat. This was in 2015. It was cheered on by people who love government making decisions for people instead of people making those decisions for themselves. In just 6 years since that decision, it now appears that we don't agree as a society on what the definition of a girl and boy even is anymore. Now, remember, at the time of the decision by the Supreme Court, we were told that the redefinition of marriage was just about giving two people, regardless of what their sex was, the same right to enter the same kind of marital covenant as heterosexual couples, although everyone always had the same right. Take it up with God if you want to have a ceremony in front of him. Now, raise children, get a dog, put up the American flag, whatever. I don't care. I don't like the appeals to government all the time for validation on actions or decisions that grown adults should be able to make without having the government always constantly 24/7 intervene. But this was how gay marriage was sold to the American people. Now, 6 years later, it seems like the redefinition of marriage was just the start of this effort to redefine every aspect of human sexuality. The latest example of this, I don't even know if I would call it a sexual revolution, just a revolution period of language, is the erasure of the existence of women altogether. And I mean that quite literally. Women are being erased. And I think it's so serious and so dangerous that instead of making jokes or simply just, being outraged, although it's an outrageous issue, is to explain what's happening, who's endorsing it, and the idea that is driving this sweeping change to America. So, to begin, there's a section from the Biden administration's budget proposal that lays out its maternal health guidance. It says this, and I quote, "The United States has the highest maternal mortality rate amongst developed nations, with an unacceptably high mortality rate for Black, American Indian, Alaskan Native, and other women of color. To help end this high rate of maternal mortality and race-based disparities in outcome amongst birthing people," in quote, because that's where I stop. There it is. It's birthing people. This is the Biden administration's maternal guidance policy. The key word being, quote unquote, maternal, a word that's pretty gender specific, as in female specific, lady parts, specific. It's in the guidance of the administration, and they removed that word, mother, and replaced it with the word or words birthing people. Well, it's very Orwellian. The revolution is complete when the language is perfect. And also enough to kind of make your head explode. Does Joe Biden, does Biden and the Democrat Party really believe that birthing people is a more accurate reflection of reality than the word mother? And they do. And if you don't believe me, well, you should, because there's tons of video of them saying this. We have to get off this thing where we say, well, good old Joe and the Democrat Party, they're not radicalized, it's just the left wing. The Biden administration and the entire party at this point are 100% radicalized. And this is just ultimately adopting the insanity of the far left at lightning speed. They're continuing down that path. It is very also increasingly how leftist Democrats talk about women. Remember those videos? Let me show you them. Watch.
Let us recommit our efforts and support to ensure that every birthing person across this nation is empowered and feels safe.
We have not created an infrastructure to support birthing people.
All pregnant and birthing people deserve to be treated with love.
Birthing while Black should not be a death sentence.
Health equity for Black birthing people is attainable.
Mothers and babies and Black birthing people are important.
We desperately need long-term fixes to support the healthcare needs of Black women and birthing people.
The most marginalized Black and Indigenous birthing people.
To systemically shift the way we approach health care for birthing people of color.
And respectful of Black women and birthing people.
The maternal mortality crisis among Black birthing people in the United States.
Black birthing people.
And birthing people.
For birthing people.
Black birthing people.
And a Black birthing person.
Birthing people. Do Joe Biden and Democrats like Cori Bush and AOC, do they really believe that there's no such thing as women anymore? Do Democrats really believe this? I mean, what in the ever-loving world are they smoking? What's the size of your crack rock? I'm very interested in what gets you to this point where you're saying the words birthing people. Now, the Biden administration, well, this philosophy that they're delving into, it's postmodernism, which is the idea that there's no truth, or at least if there is a truth, it can't really be known. And that's how you get your truth and my truth, but no facts. There's no such thing as objective truth. It's an Alice in Wonderland view of the world in which down is up is down. And Joe Biden, well, I guess all the women are Alice and he's the Cheshire Cat. I mean, I don't know. Is Alice even a woman anymore? The whole point is that the Biden administration has been seized by postmodern leftists who believe that reality will conform to whatever they want it to be. It's a make-believe world where you can play pretend and ignore objective truth. Like there's no crisis on the border, or how printing and spending $6 trillion doesn't matter. Kids who are not in danger from coronavirus should be injected with vaccines that only have emergency authorization and wouldn't be legal otherwise. And yes, men can be women and women can be men. I mean, after all, there's no truth, because for a postmodern leftist, whoever has the power, they get to determine what the truth is. And the Biden administration has decided that there's no such thing as women, apparently. And that's why these exact same postmodern leftists who've also taken over corporate America, I swear to you, hands to sky, they call breastfeeding chest feeding now. And a company like Tampax, the tampon people, they tweet stuff like this. This is an actual tweet. It reads, fact, not all women have periods. Also fact, not all women with periods are not all people with periods are women. Let's celebrate the diversity of all people who bleed. Lots of hashtags. Well, if you're a dude and you're bleeding, you might want to go see somebody about that. Tampax calls that statement a hashtag period truth. I mean, hold up. I mean, if you don't believe that it's true that a man can menstruate, what's wrong with you? Makes you a transphobic bigot. And so the march to erase women continues. You see, Democrats are embracing the idea that all you have to do to be a woman is to think you are one. See, women are reduced to breasts and menstruation. Yay, equality. At one time, as recently as a couple of days ago, this belief, by the way, would have entitled you to receive some serious therapy. Now today, the idea that women don't exist, this entitles you to bully other women and erase them entirely as a category. Take women's sports, for instance, because a man can now simply say he is a woman. Men who say this are now able to compete against women, which means women no longer truly have a thing called women's sports. And it also means that increasingly, women no longer will win many competitions, because that is increasingly the outcome happening across the country. If men who say they are women and they go through puberty as men and they grow up as men and they start competing in women's sports in the Olympics, eventually women will likely never win an event again. Why? That stubborn, awful thing called reality. The reality, again, is men have bigger bone mass. They have muscle mass. They are anatomically and physiologically different, and taking female hormones or suppressing your own doesn't change that enough to overcome your advantages. You want to have a conversation about privilege, there's the male privilege. So the revolution then continues, and women continue to be erased, unless you think that it's just conservative firebrand Dana Loesch digging in with her stuffy traditional views of women and opposing this wonderful new idea about the female gender. Let me point to you some other women who are just as concerned about the Democrat Party's canceling of women. Oh, here's one. How about leftist and straight-up socialist J.K. Rowling, author of the Harry Potter series? Not exactly a conservative. And when J.K. Rowling insisted that a man can't really be a woman and asked, really seriously, somewhat facetiously about, well, what happened to the word women, she was attacked for her horrible, outrageous views. And what she said was considered hate speech. And according to the left, J.K. Rowling is transphobic. The left would very much like to cancel her books, but as of yet, they have not been successful. Or how about another woman who agrees with me? She's obviously a bigot according to the far left, Martina Navratilova. I can't ever say her last name. Navratilova, the famous tennis player. You know, that Martina. The first tennis player ever to admit she was a lesbian. An absolute BA of a tennis player. But for saying that men who say that they are women should not be able to compete against women in women's sports, oh, they came from Martina too, the rage mob did. Real women who have real courage from all over the political spectrum, they see where this is going. And just a couple more examples of this sexual insanity. Men who like to dress up as women and they want to read storybooks to your children, as you've probably heard by now, they have what they call drag queen story hour. Now, if you object because you think that maybe perhaps men who behave like hypersexualized women have and maybe they shouldn't be reading books to kids, right? Maybe keep that in the adult entertainment section, maybe keep it in the club, whatever. If you express this disagreement, they'll try to cancel you. And just lately, you notice that all those newfangled pronouns showing up next to people's name at work, it's an attempt to force everybody to participate in the cancellation of women by embracing the notion that you are whatever gender you say you are. And there's no such thing as binary sexuality or fixed gender. And if you don't put those pronouns next to your name and affirm that you agree with us, they'll erase you just like they're erasing women. And if you disagree with all of that, they call you a TERF, which stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminist, and it's a sexist slur said by sexists. This is the end game of the sexual revolution, complete and total obedience to the postmodern left, who have now seized the Democrat Party and they want to use the full power of the state to make you complicit in this whatever Alice in Wonderland world in which we live. Agree to the crazy or you're erased. That's all there is to it. So we should make an appeal, honestly, to people who are classical liberals, people who are open-minded, who are still inquisitive and curious, and especially Democrat women of good faith, and women who just like their daughters and want them to succeed. All true actual feminists, because really it doesn't matter what party line you are. This is ultimately, the erasure of women is a progressive patriarchal attempt. It's a progressive patriarchal strategy. The patriarchy is real and it votes Democrat. It's progressive and it believes that women should be erased. No, true feminism is recognizing that women exist and women have all kinds of choices and we're not homogenized and some of us may make different choices from others. So those women, that's really ultimately who we should be appealing to. The sense of those women, because we have to stop pretending that ideas like this don't have consequences. It's not a small thing to call mothers birthing persons in order to accommodate people who are dealing with gender dysphoria. We don't hate people whose gender identity is confused. I mean, I can't stand the idea that simply questioning something means persecution. It's illiberal. But we also can't rearrange society around a tiny percent of people's mental pathologies. This is not simply a matter of live and let live. This is the bending of biological reality and the imposition of a lie on a whole society. And it severely damages women. It damages your daughters. Imagine your daughter being defeated by a biological male after working her entire life to be a top track athlete. Because that's what's happening now. Imagine a woman who has been raped going to a women's shelter and finding out that biological men who say that they are women are also at that shelter, and now they feel unsafe. Imagine an entire psychological and medical field who can only offer affirmative care to any kind of young girl with gender dysphoria, and that means they have to affirm her feelings. And if that girl simply feels like she's actually a boy, then they must be affirmed by a medical professional. And if that girl, who could be your daughter, say if they want to have surgery, if they want to remove their breasts, by law in many places, that has to be affirmed by procedure with the approval of medical professionals, and it's happening now. This is the so-called sexual revolution that is being entirely embraced by the Marxist Democratic Party in this administration. And at this point, we can't keep pretending that Democrats are the party of women or feminism. This is a party that doesn't care about women. If you're erasing them, you don't care. And if you don't believe that they should exist, then you don't care. They care about the socialist and Marxist ideology and the imposition of said ideology on you and all other women. Elections have consequences, and because of hatred on the left for Donald Trump, many have embraced an administration that is at war against their own daughters, their own selves. Enough is enough. You got to protect women and daughters. You have to protect our children and affirm the biological reality that women do in fact exist. We have the stretch marks and the episiotomies and all of the consequences of 9 months of labor to prove it, right? And you have men and you have women, and there are no such thing as birthing people. There are mothers. And if we continue to vote for a party that embraces this gender insanity, then you're consenting to the erasure of women and our own daughters. That is sexist. That is misogynistic. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the patriarchy.